What are the top diagrams that business analysts create on the job? To understand them, we're going to be using a simple case study. We're going to be working with SwiftKart. SwiftKart is a fictional e-commerce startup. I love e-commerce, so I love using e-commerce startups a lot for my examples. But anyway, in this case, SwiftKart is a fictional e-commerce startup that is building a web and mobile application. And they're doing that so that users can order groceries online and get them delivered to their houses within 90 minutes. So using that, let's look at the different diagrams that a business analyst would create. As you know, my name is Olumide Adeleye. I'm the business analysis coach. And if you head over to businessanalysiscoach.com, you'll find my courses, certification courses for programs of the British Computer Society, otherwise known as BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. You'd also find my practical course, which is known as the Business Analysis Accelerator. You can join the next cohort of that. Before we go on to look at the diagrams, let me also mention that if you've not subscribed to this channel, do so right away. Click on that subscribe button, turn on notifications, leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know that this is beneficial to you. Now to the diagrams. We're going to begin by looking at diagrams that are relevant to understanding the scope of the project and the stakeholders involved. And under this, we're going to look at two diagram types. They are the context diagram and the stakeholder map. Let's begin with the context diagram. A context diagram is a high-level diagram that shows a system in relation to its external entities. Okay, that probably didn't make any sense to you, but essentially the system is what you're building. And the entities are like the external actors that are connecting to it or using it in one way or the other. A context diagram can be particularly useful for preventing what is called scope creep, which is a situation where the scope of a project keeps changing. And you often have that when things are not well defined at the beginning. With a context diagram, you know exactly what makes up the system and you understand that system in context. If we look at our case study, SwiftKart, for the context diagram, you would have the application itself in the center. And then around that, you're going to have the customers who are placing orders. You'd have the payment gateway, which is processing the transactions. You would have the delivery drivers that are getting the order details. And you'd have the store system, which is confirming the inventory. So these are the different entities that are relating with that system. You would also have arrows that show how data flows between them. So at a glance, you can look at that and you understand the system. That is exactly what a context diagram does. It brings clarity and it ensures that nobody is making wrong assumptions. Nobody looks at it and assumes that it does anything beyond what it does. Okay, so no scope creep. It is clear. It is easy to understand at a glance. That's a context diagram. The second diagram type I will be talking about is what is called the stakeholder map. Very specifically, I would be talking in this case about what is called a power interest grid. This is a visual tool that helps you to itemize your stakeholders, but also show their level of interest and their level of influence with regards to a project. It's a great tool for coming up with your communication strategy, because with the power interest grid, you know exactly where each stakeholder sits, and that helps you to know how much time you need to dedicate to communicating with them, what mediums might be best for each one, because essentially you're determining how important they are or how relevant they are to your work in that project. So, using our case study, which is SwiftKart, on the power interest grid, we would have everyone, all the stakeholders listed out. So we would show the customers, the store managers, the delivery drivers, the product owner, investors, and the customer service people. And on that grid, we would show them according to their level of influence and according to their level of interest. So for example, the customers would sit within the high interest but low influence quadrant, and you have investors who would sit in the high influence and medium interest quadrant. Of course, the actual dynamics might be different depending on the specific situation you're working on. Now let's also examine two types of diagrams that can help you to understand your users and their needs. So we're going to start by looking first at the empathy map. Essentially, an empathy map shows you what a user says, what the user thinks, what it does, and what he feels during their interaction with a product or service. So it essentially helps you to build empathy. In other words, you are able to put yourself in the shoes of the user, and that helps to understand what it feels like to be that user at each point in time. So remember that you have four quadrants: what the user says, what the user thinks, what the user does, what the user feels. And it is best for user research, for UX design, for product discovery. With this tool, you are able to humanize the needs of the user. You are able to make decisions from a user-centered standpoint because you're putting yourself in the shoes of the user. So for our case study, SwiftKart, let's look at a quick example. A mother who uses SwiftKart to order groceries, and then she says, "I'm always short on time." She thinks, "I hope this app doesn't mess up my order." She does. She uses her phone at lunch break to shop, and she feels frustrated with late deliveries. By noting all of that, you can see some necessary features. You can see that for this kind of app, it would be a great idea to have a live delivery tracking feature so that it helps to reduce anxiety for this kind of user. Still on understanding users and their needs, there's another tool called the Customer Journey Map. The Customer Journey Map. And this one just helps you to plot the journey of the customer across different time points or across different touch points. So it is a visual timeline of a customer's interaction with a product or service across different touch points. With the Customer Journey Map, you're able to understand the experiences of the customer, the emotions of the customer, the pains of the customer at different points in time. Just like the empathy map, this is great for improving customer experience. By using it, a business is better able to understand the needs of the customer and therefore develop products that actually meet the needs of the customer. So let's assume that we want to apply that to SwiftKart. That might look like documenting the different steps that the customer takes, all the way from maybe seeing the Facebook advert that serves as the motivation to purchase something from SwiftKart. So seeing the Facebook advert, installing the app, browsing groceries, placing an order, waiting for delivery, and eventually giving feedback. So all of those different steps are noted in the Customer Journey Map. This matters because using this map, you're able to see the pain points. You start seeing the points where customers drop off, the places where they begin to lose interest, the places that are too much of a burden for them. And you will then know how to improve those points. That's how you know where to improve the user experience. Now let us consider a couple of diagrams that you would use to understand and to define your functional requirements. We will begin by looking at the use case diagram. The use case diagram is a diagram that helps you to identify and to state your actors, the use cases, and the relationships between them. In other words, you're going to identify the different people who are going to interact with the system, what they are using the system for, so the use cases, and the manner of those relationships. So this helps you to define the functionality of the system at a high level. It's a great way of knowing what the functional requirements are. I once made a video about how you can make a use case diagram using the example of a bank's mobile app. Please check that out on my channel. In the case of our case study, SwiftKart, the use case model or the use case diagram would be something like this. You'd have a diagram that shows the customer as an actor, and the customer would be able to browse products, which would be a use case, place order, make payment, track delivery. Those are use cases that can be performed by that actor who's known as customer. You would have another actor known as the driver, and driver can accept order, can update delivery status, and on like that. Then you would be interested in the user story map. This is a diagram that helps you to organize and prioritize your user stories based on the user goals and the workflows. It breaks down functionality into user-friendly features and how you can deliver in slices. The term user stories is synonymous with agile methodologies. So you would use a user story map for agile planning for feature prioritization in an agile environment. Using our case study, SwiftKart, the user story map would look like this. You would break down the journey into big goals like shop, pay, and receive delivery. Under shop, you would list stories like search for item, filter by category, add to cart. And then you would slice across for the minimum viable product or the MVP. You would show just enough stories to launch a basic version, since the goal of that is the MVP, the minimum viable product. With this, everyone has a clear understanding of what is going into that first version, that MVP. Everyone knows what is coming up right now in the MVP and what will come up later, what is saved for later. That's essentially the logic behind prioritization, determining what needs to be done now and what can wait until later. Let's also consider a couple of diagrams for modeling processes and system behavior. For this, we're going to start with the business process model. The process model. You must have heard about that because it comes up in business analysis quite a bit. A business process model is a detailed workflow that makes use of the notation called the BPMN, Business Process Modeling Notation, to describe how a business process flows from the start to the end. So it means that you can use it to analyze, to document, and to model the current and the future business processes. This gives room for determining places where there must be improvements and corrections as well. It's best used for high-level processes, so you can use it to show processes across departments and across systems. The big value that it offers is that it facilitates process optimization, process improvement, and process standardization. Using our example, SwiftKart, it's going to look like this. The customer checks out, the store receives the order, the store accepts or rejects it, the delivery driver is assigned, driver delivers the groceries. So each role, the customer, the store, the driver, would get a separate lane, which is called a swim lane. The reason why this matters is that it gives a full picture of how the business runs across people and across systems. You can also choose to model at a more detailed level, or do I say at a lower level. You can do this using what is called the UML Activity Diagram. This is a diagram that shows the step-by-step workflow of actions, including decisions, parallel paths, and loops. So an activity diagram focuses on showing you exactly how a process or how a system behavior works internally. In it, you have elements like the activities, the control flows, decisions, start and end points. You have the fork and joins, things like that. It is best used for modeling the logic of a single use case or a complex process. So, assuming you wanted to create an activity diagram for SwiftKart, you would focus on a specific process. So let's say that you're focusing on the checkout process, for instance. For that, you would show something like this. Customer selects items, goes to cart, chooses a payment method, and either completes the payment or gets an error. You also add decisions like, did payment go through? Yes, confirm order, or no, show error. This matters because it shows you the behind the scenes logic. It's great for developers, so it's something that you're creating with developers as one of the primary audiences. It helps them to understand the logic behind the flow. Finally, let's consider a couple of diagrams that you would use for modeling the flow of data and information in your system. We would begin by looking at the one called the entity relationship diagram. An entity relationship diagram represents the structure of data. So it shows the entities, which are the things. It shows the attributes, which are like their properties, their features, and it shows the relationships that the entities share. With an entity relationship diagram, you can easily organize and visualize the data requirements of a system. It's a diagram that you create for audiences like the data analysts, the developers, and the database developers or database designers as well. And it helps to ensure that your data modeling is clear and there are clearly defined relationships between your data sets. Here is what the entity relationship diagram would tell for SwiftKart. A customer has many orders. An order has many order items. Each order item links to a product. A delivery driver is assigned to an order. That's just at an overview level. Obviously, for you to properly understand that, you would want to know more about entity relationship diagrams. That way you would be able to read them and understand what exactly they're saying. The final diagram we're going to be looking at, which is also still along the line of modeling data and information flow, is what is known as the data flow diagram. The data flow diagram is a great diagram for looking at the flow of data in your system. So it shows how data moves through your system, where it comes from, where it goes, and how it is transformed in the system. A data flow diagram is actually a more complex depiction of the context diagram. So the context diagram is a level 0 data flow diagram. Okay, the data flow diagram is just you going into more detail. So now you're showing processes as against just one process. You're showing data stores, which would not be in a context diagram. You're showing data flows and external entities. It helps you to identify redundancies or bottlenecks in your data flow, and that's very useful for system re-engineering. Again, let us consider how that would be done for SwiftKart. We would show how data moves. So the customer enters delivery address, it goes to the order processor, and then system checks inventory and sends confirmation to user and dispatches to the driver. With this simple data flow diagram, the development team would understand where the data is coming from and where it goes. So, we've considered 10 different diagrams that you should know about as a business analyst. If you are unfamiliar with any of those, or if you could not understand the explanations, just note that they do take some time to master. And for you to master them properly, you might want to enroll in a practical course like the accelerator that we provide at TWIM Institute. So if you reach out to us, I'm going to put our details on the screen and in the description. If you reach out to us at TWIM Institute or you go to businessalysis.coach.com, you would find options for our practical training, which we've called the accelerator or BA 201. You can enroll for that and you would be able to master these different diagramming techniques. I also have certification classes that you can take advantage of. Certification classes for certification programs of BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, or the British Computer Society. To take advantage of those at Africa-friendly prices, which apply regardless of where you are in the world, just reach out to us, businessalysis.coach.com. I look forward to hearing from you. My name is Olumide Adeleye. Make sure you've subscribed to this channel so that you can get more of my content, and make sure you leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know that you're getting value from this. See you in my next video.